Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today we are finally checking out the Asus ROG Strix RX 5700 XT graphics card. Bit of a mouthful that one, but it is an ROG Strix graphics card, so yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, I think we'll jump straight into looking at the card and seeing what it's all about. For those of you who are familiar with Strix graphics cards, then this 5700 XT model, it's not really going to offer up any surprises. Pretty typical Strix graphics card here. It's very similar to that massive GTX 1660 Ti card that we looked at a little while ago. Didn't really make much sense because it was a high-end GTX 1660 Ti, if there is such a thing. But anyway, we now have a high-end RX 5700 XT. So brand new Strix cooler, latest and greatest model, has the new Axial Tech fans. Today's video is sponsored by Corsair and the new Hydro X series. If you're keen to get into custom liquid cooling but you don't know where to start, check out their custom cooling configurator. And this is a useful tool for even experienced builders. The interactive and intuitive configurator allows you to visualize how the end product will look, and most important of all, allow you to quickly and easily work out all the cooling bits you'll need to make your ultimate gaming PC. For more information, please check the link in the video description. The card itself measures 305mm long, 130mm tall and 54mm wide, making it a very long and tall triple slot card. That being the case, you probably won't be surprised to hear that it weighs in at a rather hefty 1,453 grams, and that actually makes it the heaviest 5700 XT graphics card that we've seen so far, beating even the MSI Gaming X model by around 40 grams. Around on the back side of the card we find a full-length backplate, and again this is the typical version that you'll find on a Strix graphics card. However, unlike the previous versions that we've already looked at, such as the RTX 2080 Ti Strix, this Radeon model makes better use of the backplate by turning it into a heat spreader with a number of strategically placed thermal pads. Taking the cooler off for a better look, we find a massive heatsink that weighs in at 845 grams with the plastic shroud removed. For context, the MSI Gaming X heatsink tipped the scales at 780 grams, 694 grams for Power Color's Red Devil, and just 483 grams for Sapphire's Nitro Plus. That means you're essentially getting 75% more metal with this Strix version when compared to the Sapphire Nitro Plus. And this isn't just a big heavy heatsink, it's actually quite well designed, and it features a large nickel-plated copper base plate that feeds into half a dozen nickel-plated 6mm copper heat pipes. Asus has also done an excellent job by maximizing fin density with some interestingly placed heat pipes, but yeah, it's a really cool design and they've crammed many fins as they possibly can into it. And the VRM is also cooled using an aluminium baseplate which connects to the main heatsink, though interestingly it only extracts heat from the power stages and not the alloyed chokes. Now, moving on over to the PCB, we find an interesting heat spreader / structural support that's designed to not just cool the GDDR6 memory, but also stop the card bending under the weight of that absolutely massive heatsink that we just looked at. Asus has created small ripple strips over the key components to maximize surface area for increased thermal dissipation. It's an impressive looking design, so I'm keen to see how well it works. Now, with the reinforcing bracket removed, we get a good look at the naked PCB, and here we find 8 micron GDDR6 memory chips, along with a 10+3 phase VRM. Has to be said, power delivery on this card is extreme overkill, but hopefully we see some very low VRM operating temperatures. Given the overkill VRM design, you won't be surprised to hear Asus is using a pair of 8-pin PCIe power connectors to feed power into the graphics card. Then finally, around to the I/O panel, we have a standard configuration, 3 display ports and a single HDMI output. Oh, and the I/O panel has been powder coated black, which looks pretty cool. Anyway, enough going over the card, time to put it to the test. To do this, I fired up F1 2019 and run it on a loop for an hour. We saw the Strix peak at a surprisingly high 77 degrees in a 21 degree room inside the Corsair Crystal 570X, fully populated with 120mm fans. I'll compare this to the other 5700 XTs tested later in the video, but with most running around 7 to 10 degrees cooler, it is a surprisingly poor result. Worse still, the 3 fans spun at 1900 RPM, which makes the 77 degree load temperature all the more puzzling. For example, models such as the Nitro Plus and Red Devil ran cooler with much lower fan speeds. This is strange, but there is a clue as to why the Strix runs so much hotter than expected, and it's to do with the GPU power draw. Here we see the Strix sucking down around 220 watts in this test, whereas the Red Devil in the same test only consumed around 170 watts. So that means the Strix is using almost 30% more power. Now, manually overclocked, we again saw a peak operating temperature of 77 degrees, but this time the fans were spinning at 2,200 RPM, and it was now quite easy to hear them over the case fans. Also, while we are targeting a core frequency of 2150 MHz, the card maintained a clock speed of around 2 GHz, so that's a mere 8% increase in frequency from stock. And the GDDR6 memory has a frequency cap of 950 MHz, and this was the frequency that we were able to run it at. As usual with our graphics card reviews, the focus is on operating temperatures, volume, power consumption, and overclocking, but we'll also touch on out-of-the-box performance as well as a manual overclock in a few games. There's really no need to benchmark our entire games library. The test system uses an Intel Core i9 1900K processor clocked at 5 GHz, and we have 16 GB of DDR4 3400 memory. Okay, so let's quickly blast through these game benchmarks, as they don't really tell us much, other than the Asus ROG Strix RX 5700 XT performs much like any other Radeon RX 5700 XT, and we see exactly that in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Forza Horizon 4, yeah, much of the same here. Out of the box, the Asus Strix model is like any other factory overclocked 5700 XT, and that meant it was just 2% faster than the AMD reference model. Wrapping up the gaming benchmarks, we see when testing with Shadow of the Tomb Raider that the Strix model saw a mere 5% performance uplift from our manual overclock as we hit 95 FPS on average. As noted earlier, the problem with the Strix appears to be its hunger for power. Out of the box, the GPU consumed more power than the Gigabyte Gaming OC version when manually overclocked. When compared to the AMD reference model, we're looking at a whopping 26% increase in GPU power draw and 13% more than the Red Devil. Though we did see in F1 2019 that it was almost 30% more, so it will depend on the game used. Naturally, this also impacts total system draw, and here we see, like ASRock's Tai Chi, the Strix really bumps up the total system consumption. And because of this extra power draw, the Strix runs much hotter and louder than it really ought to. Really, you'd expect this model to match MSI's Gaming X at under 70 degrees, but instead it's running almost 10 degrees hotter. VRM temperatures suffered as well. In fact, the massive overkill VRM on the Strix runs hotter than the reference design. Of course, it's having to deal with considerably more load, but this is how it works out of the box. The GDDR6 memory temperature is also very high at 82 degrees, at least relative to other high-end models from Sapphire, MSI, and PowerColor, for example. Now, you could forgive poor thermal performance if the card was quiet, but at 45 decibels, it's not exactly silent. There are much louder models, but there's also cooler and quieter models as well, such as the PowerColor Red Devil, the Gaming X, and the Nitro Plus. It's fair to say the Asus ROG Strix RX 5700 XT hasn't really impressed me like I thought it would. And for those of you wondering, I did try out the quiet BIOS mode, but it only reduced the power consumption of the card by around 10 to 15 watts, and with a 200 RPM lower fan speed due to the reduction in power consumption, the peak operating temperature for the GPU actually went up. It hit 82 degrees, and then we also saw a similar thing for the VRM and GDDR6 memory temperatures. They also increased by 6 degrees. So again, not a good result. The Strix 5700 XT just consumes way too much power. Even with a negative 20% power target, the GPU still hits 70 degrees with a fan speed of 1300 RPM, and while that does put it on par with the Red Devil, performance was slightly lower. They were only talking about 1 to 2 FPS here. Really though, the Strix seems to suffer the same fate as ASRock's Tai Chi. Both are too aggressively tuned out of the box, which kills efficiency of the Navi GPU, and while both coolers are very capable, they're at a disadvantage when compared to the competition. The Gaming OC is a really good example of how to tune the 5700 XT out of the box. With a very modest cooler, Gigabyte were able to achieve excellent results by keeping power consumption in check. But it's not just power consumption that's a problem for Asus here. Like ASRock, their MSRP is way off base. $460 US is just too much for a 5700 XT. At that point, you really are, without question, better off getting a GeForce RTX 2070 Super. For those of you wondering, I'd say $450 is the cutoff, but $440 or less is obviously preferable. At the end of the day, the Strix is a very high quality 5700 XT. It's just tuned way too aggressively out of the box and it's heavily overpriced. I'd much prefer to see an emphasis on efficiency rather than chart-topping performance, because this model really could run considerably cooler and quieter while only dropping 1 to 2 FPS, and you're obviously not going to notice a 1 to 2 FPS drop in performance, but you will notice the card running much quieter. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. I expect this will actually be my last dedicated 5700 XT graphics card review. That said, I will be trying to get my hands on a few different models, a few of the cheaper models that we haven't looked at yet for like a final roundup type video. And then that'll probably lead into like a top 5 video where we look at like best value, best performance, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, models such as ASRock's Challenger, Asus's Tough, Power Color's Red Dragon, and MSI's Mech are all on my list. It's just a matter of getting my hands on them now so I can test them all for that final roundup video. Oh, and I also have the Sapphire Pulse. So I've got that card, and yeah, that'll also be included in that roundup of all the other cards I just mentioned. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. You can subscribe for more content like this, and if you want to become more involved with the channel, get access to our exclusive Discord chat, take part in the monthly live streams that Tim and myself do, and Q&As, all that kind of stuff, then head over to our Patreon page. Link is in the video description. We also have Hardware Unboxed merch. The link for that is also in the video description. Anyway, above all else, thank you very much for watching. I'm your host, Steve, and I'll see you again next time.